Thank you so much for the introduction, Annalise, and good evening, everyone. It is a real pleasure and privilege for the American Red Cross to join you tonight. And I'm honored to participate in this event with Chairman Russell and our other wonderful guests. Let me start off with a great big thank you to the NAACP for your partnership. Time after time, the NAACP answers the call to positively impact communities. And working together, we support those in need during times of disaster. And you also host blood drives for us, and we're also working together to provide education about vaccines. In fact, right now, our partnership is making a very real difference after Hurricane Ida. Over the past weeks, volunteers from the NAACP deployed to help with damage assessment and to identify areas in need. And you connected the Red Cross with numerous partners and minority-owned vendors who are providing us with meals for the impacted areas. And leaders from the NAACP are also embedded with our response teams, so we can work together to make sure that at-risk communities are getting the help they need. So thank you again for everything you do to strengthen our mission to prevent and alleviate suffering. And this evening, we're kicking off an exciting partnership between our two historic organizations, the Our Blood Saves Lives campaign. And this is a very important effort to increase blood donations in Black communities to help patients in need, especially those battling sickle cell disease. In the US, there are more than 100,000 people who have sickle cell, and the majority of them are people of African descent. There's no cure. The only treatment is blood transfusions. And it could be such a painful and debilitating disease. The way to help people who are suffering from sickle cell is blood transfusions that are donated from people of African descent and have the same blood type as the patient. And our goal is to have enough inventory so that no one needs to endure the severe pain that comes with this disease. And we're thrilled to work together with the NAACP in this effort. And together, we can create an inclusive culture of healthy people and communities and save lives. And speaking from a Red Cross perspective, I'm also truly grateful for all that this partnership will do to further deepen our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And after the horrible murder of George Floyd and the terrible killings of other Black Americans, our country had a long overdue focus on racial justice and equity. And personally, I got hundreds of notes from African American Red Crossers who shared their experiences, their fears, their anxieties, and also their hopes for the future. And in the weeks after, so many organizations made statements about diversity, but our leadership team and I wanted to put our words into action. So we launched an action plan to strengthen the work we were already doing to make the Red Cross an even more diverse and welcoming place. And the plan focuses on three primary areas: creating additional opportunities for dialogue and learning within the Red Cross, building, retaining, and engaging a diverse workforce, and making sure we have the blood products we need for sickle cell patients. And I'm proud of the progress we've made over the past year plus. We've rolled out a number of opportunities to improve cultural competency at the Red Cross. In fact, Derek Johnson, your president and CEO of the NAACP, was one of our speakers, and attendance has been amazing. We also increased our efforts to recruit diverse volunteers and employees, and we created individual diversity dashboards so that our leaders all across the country can use them to be sure that diversity and inclusion is a top priority. And earlier this year, we expanded our sickle cell trait screening for all donors who self-identify as African American or of African descent. And this helps us better identify donors who meet the needs of sickle cell patients. And it also gives the donor important information as well. And we are so very thankful to be working with the NAACP on this critical public health issue. I'm certain that this campaign will help hospitals have the necessary inventory to support sickle cell patients in need. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everyone at the NAACP for all you're doing to help achieve this goal. My fervent hope is that this campaign will ease the suffering from this debilitating disease. So thank you all again for joining us this evening, and now I'll turn things back over to Annalise.
Thank you, Gail. I really appreciate all of the work that the American Red Cross is doing to close the gap on sickle cell, but also to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in your practices. I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, our leader, Chairman Leon Russell. Chairman Russell, I will pass the mic over to you.
Thank you, Annalise. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I want to begin on the broad level and thank Gail McGovern for her leadership at the American Red Cross, and to thank her for continuing to support the relationship between the American Red Cross and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I want everybody to understand that this is not a new relationship. This is a relationship that goes back many, many years. For me personally, it goes back to the period of time during Hurricane Andrew, when we actually took one of our then branch presidents, Adora Obianweze, now a member of the National Board and president of the Florida State Conference, and sort of assigned her to the American Red Cross to work through the end of Hurricane Andrew and its devastation in the Homestead and South Florida area. Over the years, this relationship has really crossed many boundaries. Obviously, one of the things that our intent as the NAACP was concerned was that we began to break down barriers of service and outreach to communities of color across the nation. This was particularly acute in times of disaster. And so we needed to be able to have a relationship on which we could build and where we could integrate some of the information into the Red Cross that they needed in order to better serve our communities. That is a continuing effort. We see that effort not only with domestic disaster, we see it at an international level. In many instances, we've worked with the Red Cross, particularly in Haiti, with respect to not just what's going on there now, but what's gone on there in the past. And we look to build trust in this relationship going forward to ensure that everybody, not just domestically in the United States, but everybody across the diaspora understands that the Red Cross, the International Red Cross, the American Red Cross, the Haitian Red Cross are really there to help, to be a part of that recovery effort. And we will continue to ensure that that is a major part of what we do. With respect to the fact that this is Sickle Cell Awareness Month and the fact that we're here to lift up the theme that our blood saves lives, it's a personal situation for me. This part of our relationship, which is just beginning to be developed, has special meaning to me because in 1956, when the third of my 5 brothers was born, we found out that because my stepfather and mother had formed this union, that he in fact carried the sickle cell trait. And for 27 years, he battled sickle cell. Sickle cell took him from us at the age of 27. And it is extremely important that we understand that when we donate blood, and when that blood is used for transfusions for patients with sickle cell, it ends real suffering. It begins to mitigate the problems that are caused by the disease. That was reinforced for me with a brother born 2 years later with the same trait. He died at the age of 57 from complications from sickle cell. But that's a major miracle if you think about it, because when my other brother died, life expectancy for a sickle cell patient was 30. So a brother who lived to the age of 57 with the disease is a sign that research works, that making contributions of blood work, that our blood does indeed save lives. And so for me, this is real and it is personal. We must make this relationship work for our community, for our brothers and sisters, our cousins, nieces, uncles, and aunts who suffer from this disease. It is important that we learn what, why, when, and how we can help in this battle, because this is truly an evil disease that totally decimates people in our communities. And so I look forward to the presentations that we will hear this evening. I look forward to building this relationship so that we can truly save lives across the board. Annalise?
Thank you, Chairman Russell, so much for sharing that story and for sharing with us a piece of your life. This work really is truly important, and we are so grateful that we've partnered with the experts on this disease. I'm going to introduce another member of the American Red Cross staff, Mr. Mark Smith, who's the Executive Director of Partnerships, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the partnership between the NAACP and the American Red Cross. Mark?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Annalise, and also thank you so much, Chairman Russell, for that. And, you know, I have prepared remarks, but I consider it not robbery just to pause for a minute and think about what you said and the responsibility that we all carry to combating this disease. And as someone who actually has the blood that's good for used for the transfusions, when I recently found out that my blood does go to sickle cell patients for transfusions, I went from being, you know, almost afraid to give blood, or afraid of needles, I should say, to I can't wait to give blood again because of the knowledge that our blood does save lives. And I, you know, like I said, if I can do one small thing of, you know, spending 20 minutes to give blood and overcoming my fear of the needle, to help folks live a life with a little bit less pain or without that pain at all, it's all I can do, and I cherish that. So I encourage everybody, please, to join this campaign, because truly our blood does save lives. As we prepare to add a new chapter in the book of the NAACP and American Red Cross partnership, we need to remind ourselves that this is not a new relationship, but a long-standing relationship. Our leaders have stood on the joint battlefield of serving and protecting humanity while affirming human dignity. We may think that the relationship started back in 1981, nearly 40 years ago to the day, in fact, when we signed our national MOU, which publicly stated our shared goals and interests in serving humanity. But truly, we should go back to 1940, when Mary McLeod Bethune extended the great work she was doing on behalf of the NAACP and brought monumental change to the American Red Cross. But we can't even stop there, because we can go back even further. We can go back to Lillian Wall, who supported the founding of the NAACP and was also a Red Cross nurse. So our history is 100 years old. Together, our two organizations, as I said earlier, have served humanity for 100 years. And as we look to the next century of this great relationship, let us commit to ensuring that there is ample Black blood for more than 100,000 primarily Black folks who are struggling with the sickle cell disease here in America. Those who have come before us, who have served before us, would be proud of this achievement. With that, I think I'll follow everybody else's suit, Annalise, and turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to now introduce Wendy Tabron, the Biomedical Partnerships Officer with the American Red Cross, to tell us a little bit about about the Sickle Cell Initiative, excuse me. Wendy?
Thank you, Annalise. And just like you, Mark, I am so moved. Chairman Russell, thank you for those words. President McGovern, thank you for your commitment. This is not a job for me, although I have a title, but this work we're doing in our community, I get up every single day figuring out how we can do this work and work with our partners. So I too am very, very excited this evening to share this information with you, to launch our national campaign. And you all are calling it training, but it's an awareness, it's training, it's all of the above. It's the passion that we all have, and we want to share it with you. So with that, if we could start our slides, Annalise. Thank you. If we could center it, thank you. So I don't know if you guys can see, but the slide is not exactly in the center.
Yeah, Wendy, that's just how you're seeing it. We can see it.
You can see it, okay. So what I'd like to say that I'll start off by saying, and we've heard this earlier, sickle cell disease impacts about 100,000 Americans, Black Americans, primarily Black Americans in this country, which means that it is very severe in our community. And we, as a people, we can make a change as it relates to this disease. And I'm still not able to get this slide over. Thank you. So sickle cell shaped blood cells, these cells cause symptoms that bring about extreme pain and acute anemia, tissue and organ damage, strokes. Children and adults experience strokes. So this is very critical. We, as folks that do not deal with this disease, people with sickle cell, it is very, very common for them to deal with this type of pain. So we have the ability to move the dial and to make sure that folks can dealing with all of the pain and the suffering that they have to deal with by our ability to give blood, and our blood will make a difference. We can go to the next slide. So this brings us to why we are here tonight. We want to launch the Sickle Cell Initiative. The Sickle Cell Initiative, we have been planning and working towards this goal. So by 2025, we want to triple the African American blood donor base to eliminate the gap in our ability to meet hospital demand and to provide the most compatible blood. You've heard people mention this evening that it's so important that our blood is a better match. So we want to make sure when a patient shows up in the ER or in the hospital that the right blood is on the shelf for them, and that we can help with some of that suffering that those patients go through. Next slide. So we have an all-inclusive and encompassing engagement. We are going to engage our communities. We're going to engage the diverse communities, our churches, organizations like the NAACP, other organizations that have said, we want to work with you, we want to work with the NAACP, whatever it takes. We also want to look at our volunteer base. We want to make sure that the volunteers that are working with us reflect the community in which we're working. And that so that when people come out to give blood, they see folks that look like them and that we're all in this together. We will launch this in our key markets. We're going to make sure that we have a dedicated force on the ground to work in these key markets. I'm a part of the team. We have a partnership team. We have local sickle cell reps, and we have numerous work groups that are working to make sure that we are out there making a difference in the community that is impacted the most with sickle cell disease. Go to the next slide. So we ask our partners, tell us what is important. What can we do to encourage our partners to want to give more blood? And what they told us that matters is we need to know that when we encourage our family and friends, that it's safe, that it's convenient, and that we want to donate our blood with our friends and family. And being asked by someone personally helps as well. So we are addressing those issues. We are going to make sure that if you come to give blood at the Red Cross blood drive, we are following the CDC guidelines, and we're doing everything to make sure all of our donors are safe. We are working in the community to make sure that it's convenient. We have blood drives at churches, and the NAACP has stood up blood drives with us, and we've worked and co-partnered with different churches, the AME Church, the Baptist Convention. So we know that when we work together in our community and we're being asked by our family and friends, that increases the trust level, and it will encourage more African Americans to give blood. And then you also told us, we want to know, how is our blood helping? And so we've created educational materials to make sure that everyone knows the connection with sickle cell and how our blood helps those patients. So we've got materials that have been developed. And then with our new campaign that we're launching tomorrow, all of that information will be conveyed as well. We have health enhancing services. We offer baseline health screening when you come in to give blood with the American Red Cross. And we're really excited because we're also doing trait screening for anyone that comes in to give blood. We'll be able to let you know if you have the sickle cell trait, which is very key. And Dr. Miller will address that when she comes up. So if we could go to the next slide. So we know that, and you've heard this evening, with the frequency of transfusions, closely matched blood can decrease the risk of transfusion reactions. It is so key that we have the best and the right blood on the shelf for patients. A patient is more likely to find a compatible match from folks with a similar ethnic background. We inspire and engage Black donors, and we are conducting in-depth testing, typing, and matching to ensure that the blood is properly matched. So you've heard from folks this evening saying how important we need you to help us bring in more African American donors. So at this point, I'd like to bring up my partner and colleague, Dr. Miller, who's going to spend time talking to us about the importance and the need for diverse blood. Dr. Miller?
Thank you so much, Wendy. Next slide, please. I'd like to thank Chairman Russell for his heartfelt sharing of his personal story and his lived experience with sickle cell disease. And I also want to thank Gail McGovern, our CEO, for her incredible leadership and support of the work that we're doing in the Red Cross for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So any conversation that we have about sickle cell disease, we start with talking about sickle cell trait. Looking at the figure over on the right side of the screen, this is a graphic of the inheritance pattern of for sickle cell disease. The two figures at the top represent parents that have sickle cell trait. So they have a normal hemoglobin gene and a sickle cell trait gene. The figure on the bottom row, all the way over to the right, that is completely colored in, that is an offspring that has sickle cell disease. So every time these parents have a child, there's a 25% chance that that child will have sickle cell disease. All the way over on the left side of the graphic is a figure that is colorless. So 25% of the time, every time these parents would have a child, there's a 25% chance that that child will have completely normal hemoglobin genes. They will not have sickle cell trait. And the two figures in the center represents the fact that 50% of the time, these parents will have an offspring that will have sickle cell trait. So they are called sickle cell trait carriers. Important information about sickle cell trait is that individuals who have sickle cell trait are eligible to donate blood. And the Red Cross is performing sickle cell trait testing on individuals who self-identify as African American. And the reason why we're focusing on African Americans is because, as it has been stated multiple times previously, over 100,000 people in this country have sickle cell disease, the great majority of whom are African American. Next slide, please. So why do we need diversity in the blood supply? First, to meet the transfusion needs of the general population. The majority blood type in this country is type O, and African Americans have a significant proportion of the population that are type O. So even if we weren't talking about the transfusion needs of patients with sickle cell disease, we still need African Americans to donate to meet the general transfusion needs of the population for treatment for cancer, for multiple trauma, for everyday surgeries that people have. So we need African Americans to donate just for general transfusion purposes. The donor pool should reflect the recipient pool. Again, African Americans make up about 12 to 13% of the US population, and the donor pool should reflect the recipient and general population. We need diversity in the donor pool to limit red blood cell antigen exposures for patients that require frequent transfusions. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And generally, the closest red blood cell match for a patient requiring frequent transfusions comes from donors of the same ethnic or genetic background. And the next few slides will make this crystal clear. Next slide, please. So this is a slide with data and information regarding red blood cell antigens and RH antigens. When we look at our blood types, remember we are A, B, O, and RH. That's the blood type. And then there's also a positive and negative, and that represents the RH antigens. So over on the left side of the screen, we're looking at individuals who are African American or of African ancestry. At the fourth bullet, where you see 67%, this is a red blood cell antigen type known as Duffy A negative, B negative. And you can see that those who are of African descent, 67% of those in the African American population have this red cell blood type. Over on the left side of the screen, we're looking at those who are of European ancestry. It's very rare, almost 0% of anyone who is of standard European stock to have this red cell type, Duffy A negative type. So just looking at that red cell antigen, should be clear to you that why is it so important for African Americans to donate and people of African descent to donate. So if we are looking for a unit of blood for a recipient who is Duffy A negative, B negative, we are more than likely going to find it in someone who is of African descent or African American. Looking at the top two bullets at 73% and 78% over for those that are African ancestry, these are Rh antigens. Again, Rh positive and Rh negative. So 73% of African Americans and 78% are C negative and E negative. And I don't know if you can remember back when Mark was talking about the fact that the last time he donated, he found out that he was, an excellent match for patients that have sickle cell disease. That means he is C negative, E negative, and that antigen that is K, which is a red blood cell antigen, is negative. So he is C antigen, E negative, and K negative, and that's what makes him an excellent match for some patients with sickle cell disease. Not every patient with sickle cell disease requires this antigen configuration, but many patients do. One additional thing about the donor pool in this country, the great majority of blood donors are Caucasian. Somewhere around 75 to 80% of the donor pool in this country is donated by Caucasians. So with that information as well, you can see how critical it is for African Americans to donate blood to meet the transfusion needs of patients that have sickle cell disease, the great majority of whom are African American. Next slide, please. And this is another slide that, again, should make it crystal clear why we need African Americans to donate. So we're looking at, you see that the notation for need. So this is an actual recipient who we were looking for blood to match, to transfuse to this patient with sickle cell disease. So this person's blood type is O, C negative, E negative, K negative, and also JKB negative, which was one of those antigens that I didn't mention on the last slide. But if we screened or if we tested the recipient's blood against 250 units of blood donated by primarily Caucasian donors, we would find a single compatible unit. Next slide, please. So if we had a great deal of blood on our shelves donated by African Americans, we were looking at this same recipient and we screened 250 units of blood from African Americans, we would find at least 28 out of those 250 units that would be compatible for this recipient. So again, these three slides should make it crystal clear why we need African Americans to donate blood to meet the transfusion needs of patients with sickle cell disease. So thank you for your attention, and I will turn the program back over to Wendy.
Thank you, Dr. Miller, for that awesome description and more in-depth understanding. At this point, I would like to introduce Tierney Bell. Tierney is one of our sickle cell warriors. She has partnered with the American Red Cross on many of these training sessions. We appreciate her. We love her. She is a sickle cell fighter, and she is going to share her story this evening of her journey fighting sickle cell each and every day and living a very productive and awesome life. So, Tierney.
Thank you, Wendy. And thank you guys so much for having me tonight. And so I hope to just enlighten you all about sickle cell disease and how it affects, people with sickle cell disease and some of the things I've been through with sickle cell disease. And so just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am from Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised here in Atlanta. I was diagnosed with sickle cell disease at the age of 6 months. So my family found out that I have sickle cell disease and was diagnosed with sickle cell disease at 6 months because at that time is when I had my first pain episodes. And so in the previous slides, as Wendy and Dr. Miller explained, a pain episode is like those crescent-like moon cells that go through your bloodstream and causes chronic pain. And so the pain, to me, if I had to describe the pain, it would be like a squeezing sensation, like a rubber band that is extremely tight and won't let go. And this pain episodes can occur anywhere. It can be in your joints, it can be in your back, it could be in your hips, it can just erratic throughout your entire body and even affects organs. So I can recall the story that my mother told me. She said at 6 months, I was screaming to the top of my lungs and wouldn't stop crying no matter what she did. And all of a sudden, she noticed I was swelling all over from head to toe as if I was having an allergic reaction. So she rushed me to the hospital. And at that moment is when they told her that I had sickle cell disease. So back in the 80s, a lot of the nurses and doctors, especially in the inner city, were not disclosing to parents that their child had sickle cell disease until they actually took the infant home and created a bond with the infant, created a bond with the child. And so this was because in the 80s, a lot of the parents were African American and of low socioeconomic status. And so they would just feel like the child is sick, leave the child at the hospital, and a lot of sickle cell patients were orphan children. Well, lucky for me, my parents, loved me from birth, and they were extremely, saddened by this news, but they knew we were going to be fighters. They knew we were going to fight this illness. They knew we were going to be warriors. And my parents did not get a test for their sickle cell trait. So they didn't know their status when they actually had me. So my older sister actually has the trait, and she didn't know that either. So, my parents wish they had have known, and they would have had a better understanding of what sickle cell disease is and how to treat sickle cell disease. So my parents were learning as I got older. And every year I will have pain crises, sometimes every month. Pain crises can last from 24 hours or 30 days. I've been in the hospital as long as 3-4 months before. So I could even remember as a child, my teachers at the time would come to my bedside, and they would have homework packets and, just keeping me abrupt or on schedule with my school, I guess I would say, on schedule. And that was actually good because I got a lot of one-on-one learning, but it was a lot of time missed from school and interaction with kids and, a lot of time in the hospitals. And so at the age of 5, I had my gallbladder removed. At the age of 6, I had my spleen removed. I've had multiple surgeries every year when I was younger. Like, it was a lot of surgeries because sickle cell disease affects organs as well. So it was over and over and over again, in and out of the hospital visits. Well, I vividly remember at the age of 17, I was a convincing young girl, I would say. And I convinced my parents that I was healthy enough and well enough to do competition cheerleading. And as you know, competition cheerleading is a extreme sport. So I would flip and tumble and, all of that good stuff because I just was so into it and excited. And I convinced them I was well enough for this. Well, one night after competition, I had a stroke. I had a TIA. It's called a transient ischemic attack, and it's like a mild stroke. I had overexerted myself, and I was rushed to the hospital. I remember looking at my mother's face thinking, this is it. This is what they always tell us about strokes. And my mother's strength was undeniable. She looked at me like, hey, we fought everything else. We just fight this too. And so at 17 is when I started my chronic transfusions every month. So every month, I would check into the hospital one Friday a month, and I would get, hooked up to the IV and get a blood transfusion. So I did that all throughout college, all throughout grad school, and even now at 35, I still go in once a month, one Friday a month, and I get a blood transfusion. And that's been since 17, since I had that TIA, because doctors want to prevent any stroke or any other TIA. And I must say, because of these blood donations, because of this life-saving treatment that I receive every month, I'm able to have a very high-functioning, good adult life. So I went on to get my bachelor's of science in biology and chemistry from Xavier University in New Orleans after high school. And then from college, I went on to do my master's in public health with Morehouse School of Medicine. And so now I work at the Environment Protection Agency as a life scientist. And I am able to keep such a high balance and work-life schedule because of these donations and because of blood transfusions. Also, I enjoy eyelash extensions. It's like a hobby or a gig of mine that I do on the weekends and the evenings. So pretty busy lifestyle. But because I'm able to get blood donations and because I'm able to see great doctors here in the Atlanta area, and of course support from my family and my friends throughout even childhood, is why I am as successful or, living a great life, because of blood transfusions, blood donations, and support. And so I just wanted to share my story, and I thank the Red Cross for allowing me to share my story. Every time I share it, I think I share a little bit more and more and more details. But I truly enjoy sharing my story because I know how important it is for African Americans to feel comfortable with giving blood donations. And I hope I've inspired you to give blood donations, because there are multiple stories like me. There are multiple stories with patients that's needing blood donations and blood transfusions every month. So thank you for letting me share, and I'll stick around for any questions. So back to you, Annalise.
Wow, what a powerful and inspiring story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tierney is proof that Black blood is literally saving lives. And we want to encourage you today to assist us in helping to save lives. If I could have the next slide, please, because I want to talk about what's our call to action, right? What are we asking you, our unit leaders, to do? Excuse me. Next slide. So we want you to first donate blood, right? We want you, the American Red Cross holds several blood drives. I see a ton of you in the chat talking that you yourself host blood drives, which is amazing. We love that. We want you to go and donate blood. It's a great time, especially during Sickle Cell Awareness Month, but we want you to donate it as often as you can. We would love for you to advocate for the need for blood donations for patients with sickle cell disease in your community, in your units, in your branches, and with your personal relationships. You can do that by co-hosting educational forums, webinars about sickle cell disease, and the American Red Cross is here to help, right? So if you go to sleevesup.redcrossblood.org, you can sign up to host a virtual blood drive, and I'll have the Red Cross folks talk about that during our Q&A session. And then if you want to host, a meeting with your local unit, or if you want someone from the American Red Cross to be able to share resources, email partnerships@redcross.org for resources, for ways to set up a blood drive, and so that we can get out into the community and get folks to donate blood, because this is literally saving lives, and we as a community need to lean in and really, really do this. I want to open the floor up for questions, and I'll send it back to our director, Quincy, who's going to go ahead and tell us what questions we have that we can answer, and then bring back all of the panelists to assist with answering questions.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Just 1 second, and we're going to bring over our first question. Our first question is coming from Mr. Fluker Gregory. For some reason, he's not coming over, but his question is how do we get our local Red Cross to sponsor an African-American blood drive with the Red Cross and the local branch? What steps should we take to make sure this happens?
Hello, I'll take this question, Quincy. This is Wendy from Partnerships. We can start off by using that email address that Annalise mentioned. And I also wanted to inform everyone that we have prepared a toolkit for each chapter, and we will provide that information to Annalise, and that can be shared throughout your entire network. And it will have all of the details on how to set up a blood drive, how to work with us as a partnership team, If you just want to do educational seminars, we are prepared to do that. And all of the media and communication needs that each of your chapters and units may need. So that information will go straight to Annalise, and it can go right to all of the different units. I hope that answers the question.
Great, great. Our next question is, what blood type is most needed for African Americans?
Thank you for that question. So all blood types are needed from African Americans to meet the transfusion needs of patients with sickle cell disease. But as I mentioned during the presentation, the blood type that's most common in the African American community is O blood type. So we definitely need O blood, but we also, again, just need a diverse blood types from all donors of all blood types and RH types.
Great, great. Our next question comes from Miss Everett, and she asked that she was told that someone from Oakland, California, was cured from sickle cell disease. However, she's getting some other information that the disease is incurable. Is it true that it's curable, or is it not?
Sickle cell disease is curable, but it's curable only through stem cell transplant or bone marrow transplant at this time. But the issue with that is that most individuals do not have a matched sibling or brother or sister to serve as the donor of that transplantation material. So while occasionally transplants are done with an unmatched donor, sort of through the National Marrow Donor Program, or umbilical cord blood can be used to source those stem cells that are needed for transplantation. The great majority of people who do undergo bone marrow transplantation or stem cell transplantation have a matched sibling, and probably only about 15 to I would say 20% of individuals have a matched sibling. So that's why most individuals do not receive or not eligible to receive a bone marrow transplant.
Awesome. Our next question comes from Ms. Vicki Blackburn. Ms. Blackburn, you have the floor.
Ms. Blackburn,
You
I
can
think you're
unmute
muted.
yourself. Yeah.
I am wondering if there's ever a cooperative effort among communities that are people of color to do a coordinated effort on stem cell registries along with sickle cell blood donations so that they could both be addressed at the same time and both registries could be enhanced.
You're muted, Dr. Miller.
Okay, so thank you for that question, Ms. Blackburn. So we do occasionally host blood drives in conjunction with a bone marrow or stem cell drive, so that samples for people to be put on the bone marrow registry are collected at the same time that we collect blood. So if your chapter or church or your local community group is interested in having a combined blood drive and a national marrow blood drive at the same time, definitely let your Red Cross representative know, because in many cases we can just work with you to reach out to them to have a combined drive, because I absolutely agree that is the best of both worlds, to have people sign up for the bone marrow registry at the same time as having a blood drive. And when you get on the bone marrow registry, again, it's the same thing. I don't even think it's a finger stick anymore. I think they're doing mouth swabs now. So I don't even think there's a finger stick involved with it. It used to be, but now I think they're taking what are called buccal swabs. So definitely thank you for that question. And we are certainly, eager to partner with your organization in any way that you would like for us to partner. So thank you.
Awesome. So we have another question from someone who would like to lift their questions but can't be on camera. He says, I host 2 drives a year, but struggle to get African Americans to donate. For those that have been most successful, what best practices have been used to get Black donors?
So I think all of us from Red Cross have some ideas and some suggestions, but some of the work that we have been doing over the last year with creating communication materials that are specifically focused on the African American community is incredibly helpful, because we know that when we see pictures, when we are asked by individuals who look like us, we are more likely to respond. And so we understand the importance of that. And as Wendy mentioned, tomorrow we're having a nationwide launch with Burrell Communications on, Black blood saves Black lives, and getting that message out from people that look like us so that those messages will resonate. So that's an important piece. And another thing that we found out is that when we are asked by our friends and loved ones and colleagues and church members to donate blood, people will step up and show up when they're asked by someone that they trust. And then lastly, for me, and hopefully Mark and Wendy may have something to say as well, is that we trust our churches and our religious organizations. And when the pastor says, we're going to have a blood drive and you all are going to show up, guess what happens? Churches and fellowships have the blood drive and people show up. So we, as in our partnership with the American Red Cross, we absolutely value the experiences of trusted organizations and trusted individuals in the African American community, because you speak for us. You are the partner that brings in folks to donate blood. So that's why this relationship is absolutely critical. So thank you. And I'll turn it over to Mark and Wendy to share their thoughts.
Dr. Miller, that was excellent. I would just add one more. I think there's an opportunity, as y'all can look over my shoulder as well, to partner with other organizations, right? And Dr. Miller's a Delta and I'm a Q, so there it is, right? So we have, I would recommend that you also look to reach out to other organizations and have not just whether it's an NAACP or an individual church, but a broader cross section. Because one of the things that we do want to do is when we host a blood drive is have as many people as possible come and support that blood drive. So if it means bringing in other organizations, the NAACP is by far a leader within the Black community. So I think as the NAACP, if you approach other organizations like Omega, like Delta, others will join suit. And I think that just broadens the net of folks who can come and give donations.
And Mark, yes, if I can add to that, that's all spot on. And I would also say, if you're having difficulty, please reach out to your internal partner, our partners here at Red Cross, and we are here too to help support, because you will have a local rep who you'll be working with along with your national team. So we're here to help and to give advice. So if you're struggling, please reach out and let us know. And we get geared up and fired up, and we want to help you. And I am too a Delta. So Delta Sigma Theta and all of the Divine Nine, they're all a part of this. So they can help. So that's
Awesome. And our final question for the evening comes from Ms. LaVon Holbert. Ms. Holbert, you have the floor.
Yes.
Mrs. Holbert, sorry.
That's all right. I was told that I'm taking like special iron pills because I'm a chronic anemic person. they are saying that my cells are not sickle, but it keeps me anemic. So my question is, am I still able to give blood?
Thank you so much for that question, Ms. Holbert. Anyone who is anemic, again, to the extent that you are under a doctor's care for it, we definitely want you to be healthy and well and ask you to refrain from donating until your iron level is high enough and until your healthcare provider says that you are healthy enough to donate. As African Americans, our hemoglobin level is on the normal lower end of that spectrum. And so we do have to pay attention to making sure that, we take our iron as prescribed by our healthcare provider, as well as if you are a regular blood donor, you absolutely, and this is well known and well respected information from the blood banking and transfusion medicine community and from the blood donation community. If you are a regular blood donor, you should be taking iron between your blood donations. And, for those who haven't donated previously and are first-time donors, there's work to do to get prepared to be a successful blood donor so that you don't get deferred. Make sure that you start preparing to donate blood 6 to 8 weeks before you present to donate, by making sure that you are eating iron-rich foods, that, based on consultation with your healthcare provider, that you are taking an iron supplement based on your needs, and ensuring that, when you present to donate, you are healthy and well, you've been eating a great diverse diet, and that you are very well hydrated. So those things that I just described, that information is on our website, redcrossblood.org. So please go there. And as Wendy said, we are all here to help educate and support our community to be the best possible donors and be prepared to be a successful blood donor when you present. So thank you so much for that question.
Thank you.
Awesome. I'll turn it back over to Annalise.
Thank you so much, Quincy, for moderating our question and answer panel. Thank you so much to our guests for asking such phenomenal questions and to our panelists for answering them. I'd like to thank Chairman Russell and President McGovern for joining us tonight. I'd also like to thank Mark, Wendy, and Dr. Miller from the Red Cross, and Tyranny for sharing her very powerful story. As Wendy mentioned, the American Red Cross has created very simple to use toolkits for all of our units and branches. And so I will personally make sure that you receive them to host a webinar or a blood drive about the sickle cell trait, or a blood drive to collect blood, please email partnerships@redcross.org. Thank you again